Advanced was held on 21st of May, and I'm hopeful it must have been a pleasant experience for all of you. So here I am with the analysis of the physics section of the paper. So my dear students, this year, just like 2016, there were 18 questions per paper per subject. So if we talk about physics in general, there were 36 questions in physics overall, just like 2016. But as I had said in my power tips video, we can anticipate from 18 to 20 questions. So that falls on that line as well. So if we talk about the total marks of the entire paper, we had a paper of 366 marks. Last year, this paper was of 372 marks, more or less on the lines of the 2016 paper. Now, let's talk about the distribution of marks from class 11th segment and class 12th segment. So, in paper 1, there was a 50-50 weightage, that is 9 questions were from class 11th and 9 questions were from class 12th part. However, in paper 2, there were 8 questions from class 11th and 10 questions from class 12th segment. So, if we take a look about the overall paper, that is the overall 36 questions in that case, we had 47% of the questions from class 11th segment and 53% of the questions from class 12th segment. So we can say that slightly class 12th had a higher weightage. But apart from that, we can also say that 47-53 means 50-50% kind of paper. Now, if we talk about both the papers, this is my personal call, so there can be some level of variation over here. Paper 1, from my point of view, was a relatively easier paper, and paper 2 was relatively tougher compared to the last few year papers. Now we will do a structural analysis of the paper, and as I had mentioned in my power tips video, that JEE Advanced is a test of nerves. So there were some very radical changes that were incorporated this year. So let us quickly go through them. So if we talk about paper 1, there were 3 segments. In section 1, there were 7 questions, and these were one or more correct type of MCQs. So overall, the weightage of this segment, that is section 1, paper 1, was 28 marks. So if you answered a question correctly, you will be getting 4 marks. In case of a partial response, 1 marks, and in case of an incorrect response, -2 marks. So my dear students, last year there were 8 questions from this segment. So there is a variation of 1 question. When we talk about section 2, in this case there were 5 questions which were integer type of questions, and no change has been per se observed in this part of the segment as per the structure part of the paper is concerned. There were no negative marks. So if you answered a question correctly, you will be getting 3 marks, and in case of incorrect or no response, no marks will be deducted. Now, the change happened in the section 3 of the paper 1. So in section 3, there were 6 questions, but these questions were a perfect amalgamation of match the following and comprehension type of questions. So what we have seen for the last couple of years is that either it was a comprehension type or match the following types, but this year it was an amalgamation of the 2. So this year there were 3 columns, so you had to be very judicious while taking your call. So in this segment, 6 questions were there, the weightage was 18 marks. So if you talk about answering a question correctly, you'll be getting +3 marks, and in case of incorrect response, the deduction was 1 marks. So let's now move on to paper 2. From electrodynamics, let's talk about that later. Let's talk about the sectional analysis first. So if we talk about paper 2, again we had 3 segments. So in segment 1, 7 questions which were only one option correct type of MCQ. So the overall weightage was 21 marks. If you answered the question correctly, you will be getting 3 marks, and in case of an incorrect response, minus 1 marks will obviously be taken into account. Last year in this segment there were only 6 questions. So a variation of 1 question over here. Let's now move on to section 2. In section 2, my dear students, there were 7 questions. So this was a 1 or more option correct type of MCQ. The overall weightage was 28 marks. So if you answer a question correctly, 4 marks. In case of partial response, you'll be awarded 1 marks, and in case of an incorrect response, 2 marks will be deducted. So again, last year there were 8 questions, so a variation of 1 mark. So what we have seen is that in paper 2, section 1 and section 2, there is a difference of 1 questions. Now let's move on to section 3. In section 3, we had paragraph type of questions. So no change per se was observed in this segment, because with a paragraph, you had 2 questions. That is what we had seen in the last year also. 2 paragraph, 2 questions overall, 4 questions over here. The overall weightage of this segment was 12 marks. So if you answered a question correctly, you will be getting 3 marks, and there was no negative mark from this specific segment. So let's now do a difficulty analysis of the paper. So 30% of the question falls on a moderate level, 30% of the questions fall on a difficult level, and 40% of the question paper falls on an easier note. Now let's do a section-wise analysis of class 11th and class 12th segment. So if we talk about the class 11th segment, from general and experimental physics, there were 2 questions, out of which 1 was tough. From mechanics, there were 8 questions, out of which majority of them were either tough or moderate. If we talk about thermal physics, so this year thermal physics was given an extra kind of weightage, because there were 6 questions, out of which 1 was medium and 1 was difficult. And from SHM and waves, there were 2 questions. 1 question was from beats, as I had mentioned in my power tips video, that you can anticipate a question from beats. That is what happened. So there was 1 question from string wave and 1 question from sound wave. Now let's move on to the class 12th segment. So from electrodynamics, there were 12 questions this year, out of which 5 questions were of medium level and 3 questions were of difficult level. From optics, there were 3 questions, out of which 2 was medium and 1 was difficult. And from modern physics, there were 3 questions, out of which 2 were medium. So what I have done on a personal note over here is that some of the questions which were of easy conceptual understanding, I have put that in moderate category. The reason is that it involved a number of calculations and we had time constraints to take care of. So my dear students, as you're all aware that we have only 36 questions. So some of the important hotcakes that we discussed were not observant in the question paper. So what are these? Newton's laws of motion, kinematics, work, energy, power, and finally it was surprising to see that there was no question from current electricity. So this takes care of the overall analysis of the paper. I'm sure you had worked like really hard for JEE Advanced, and I wish you all the best, and I'm hopeful that I'll see you coming out with flying colors and making everyone proud. Thank you.